Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, facilitated by the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub. The New Jersey Family Engagement Hub recognizes that students thrive when families and communities are engaged in the school community, increasing the likelihood of student success. Our goals are to promote and engage in activities and policies that build collaborative partnerships among youth, family, school, and community in order to enhance child development and student achievement. We are committed to serve as a centralized information hub on family engagement, inform education practitioners and families about the latest educational opportunities and barriers by providing technical assistance, resources, and support on effective family engagement policies, practices, and activities that lead to improvements in student development, academic achievement, and long-term success. We provide parents and caregivers with easy to understand, usable information to solve everyday problems, provide youth with a voice to share their experiences and ideas, and support their continued academic success, enhance parent and family capacity to effectively work with schools and professionals in order to help meet children's needs. Um, Now I will pass it over to Erica in order to continue our presentation for tonight. Thank you.
Th- Thanks so much, Carrie. Welcome, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about empowered kids building self-control and responsibility. So I'm excited that you're joining us this evening. Before I introduce myself and my colleague Danielle introduces herself, we'd love to know a little bit about you. So if you could share with us excuse me, where are you zooming in from? How old are your students or your children? So some of you I know are either our parents or maybe your educators. So we'd love to know the age group that you work with. And then one hope you that you have for this webinar. What are you hoping to get out of our time together? So if you can, enter your location and your children's age and your hope for the webinar in the chat box. We'd love to hear a little bit from you. And I understand some of you may be on a cellular phone, and that's totally fine. If you can't write in the chat box, that's okay. But if for those of you who can, we'd love to know a little bit more about you. Rochelle, I hope I pronounced that right. Thank you so much for writing in. You have three kids. Curious what their ages are so we can make sure that we tailor our presentation to all of the age groups in this room. All right, we'll wait another, 4, 19, and 23. Okay, so a big span. Thank you so much for writing in. Anyone else who cares to share where they're coming from, how old their children are, or the children they work with are, and one hope for our webinar together? Maria, thank you so much for writing. Union County, you have ages 3 and 6, and hoping to get an understanding of how on learning and how to build them with responsibility. Okay, we hope that we're going to provide you with a lot of strategies today. Oh, and Rochelle works with children ages 5 to 21. Wow, that's a very big age span. Okay, so Danielle, if you wouldn't mind monitoring the chat box while I move on, please feel free to continue to enter in all of your information into the chat, but I'm going to move on just for time purposes. So, a little introduction into me. My name is Erica Brenton, and I am here representing SEL4NJ. And I've been an educator for over 20 years. I started my career as a New York City public school teacher. And then I found that social emotional learning was something that I really enjoyed and loved. And so I became a social emotional learning specialist. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, with my husband and two children who are in middle school and elementary school. And in my free time, I like to go on long walks and I like to read and spend time with my family. So I'm going to pass it over to Danielle, who's going to introduce herself.
Thank you, Erica. My name is Danielle Scarpa. Erica and I have very similar career trajectories. We both started as classroom teachers. I myself was an inclusive classroom teacher, so I taught general ed and special education students. And I've transitioned out of the classroom currently I've been working with teachers and doing professional development. I've been doing some parent coaching, which is what we're doing tonight, as well as working with middle and high school students with some educational technology field trips. So I still have the time that I love, which is working with children and students, as well as being able to kind of share my expertise as both a parent and an educator. Like Mari, my children are 6 and 3 as well. While I was a classroom teacher, I served on our school's culture and climate committees. I was the teacher liaison for our intervention and referral services team. So, if you work with students with special needs, or if you have students with special needs, um, if you've gone through the referral process, I would typically be called in to share some tips and strategies as a classroom teacher. When working with students, especially after COVID, created some SEL focused enrichment clubs. I live in Essex County with my husband and my 2 girls. And some things I like to do in my very limited free time are to go to Broadway shows. I'm a huge I Love Lucy fan. I love to travel and my goal this year was to get back into reading and finding some time for myself and a leisurely cup of coffee, which means if I want it iced, it stays iced. And if I want it hot, it stays hot. So we're working on it, looking to share, our varied expertise with all of you. So thank you for having me.
All right, so just a quick overview of our agenda for today and our objectives. So all of the things we're going to be talking about today fall under the bucket of what we call self-management. So self-control, responsibility, it all falls under this umbrella of self-management. So we'll take a look at what does that look like in schools, and we'll give you a lot of tools, a lot of resources, a lot of ideas. We hope you can find things that you could take back with you to work with your children. We'll talk about some common challenges that we see with children with their self-management, and then we'll provide you with some resources in closing. So we hope you just walk away from this webinar with a better understanding of what self-management is, and that you have strategies you could use with your children or your students right away. So let's keep going. I like to set the foundation with a quote. Here's a little story about this quote. So this is discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. And there's this little child staring at a marshmallow. And this is an image that comes from a study that was done in the 1960s where children were given one marshmallow and they were told that if they waited a certain period of time, they would get a second marshmallow. And so they tracked these children and they found that the children who were able to wait for the second marshmallow had more positive life outcomes than the children who were like super impulsive and ate the marshmallow right away. So today's webinar is really about that self-control, that self-discipline, that responsibility, and how we can foster that in our children. And so just a quick pulling the curtain back. So this is a series that we're teaching on social emotional learning. And this image here comes from an organization called CASEL, which is the Center for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. And they believe that all children in our country deserve high quality SEL education. And that if we teach these 5 pieces of the pie that are in the middle of the image, self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, if we teach these 5 core competencies to children, that they will be able to manage their own emotions and behaviors, have empathy and show care and concern for others, solve problems effectively, make responsible decisions, and maintain healthy relationships. So we want this for all of our children. And tonight we're specifically focusing on self-management. So this is the ability for children to manage their emotions, thoughts, and actions in different situations. It's the ability to cope with stress and anxiety, persevere through challenges, and take action to create positive change. So we hope that the tools that we'll give you tonight will be able to help you build those skills in your children. And so just a quick note about some research thought that we found is that we know it's good to be responsible and we know it's good to have self-control, but there's actual research that shows that children who are in SEL programs have an 11 percentage point gain in academic achievement over their peers. We've also found that strong self-management skills supports lower stress, fewer risky behaviors, and healthy relationships across all life stages. Students with strong self-management skills are more likely to graduate high school, persist in college, and succeed in careers. And then, really surprisingly, but amazingly, self-discipline predicts academic performance more significantly or more strongly than IQ. So these skills are super, super important. And research is telling, we know that, and research is also sharing that with us. So now we want to take a look at what does this mean, self-management, right? We keep sort of throwing these words out, responsibility, self-control, self-management. So what we're going to do now is we're going to watch a super short video that shows us what self-management looks like, both at home and in the school setting. And so what we would love to hear from you is, as you're watching this, is what resonates with you. Maybe there's something that you feel that you're doing that matches what's happening in the video. Maybe there's a new idea that you got, but we would love to hear what resonates with you. I'm gonna just quickly toggle my screen here and launch this video.
When students are aware of their emotions, they are better able to regulate them. They can learn how to manage stress and control their impulses. They are also better able to motivate themselves and work towards their personal and academic goals.
Self-management is not just understanding who you are, but what are you doing with that information? How do you behave? How do you use that information to achieve goals, to work hard towards things? How do you manage your feelings? So we talked about understanding your feelings and self-awareness, but what you do with that anger is about self-management. How do you turn your self-awareness and your feelings and your emotions into positive actions so that you can have agency and advocacy for what you believe? These are all part of self-management and critically important for not just school, but work and life itself.
As adults, as teachers, as parents, we're responsible for helping kids by creating a regulating environment. So for example, in a classroom, it's really important to think about your environment and how you're helping kids regulate. So if you have a chaotic classroom and there's always tons of noise and maybe you have stuff all over the walls and you're not really organized yourself, that might be chaotic to kids. When you walk into your own classroom, do you feel calm? Do you feel regulated? Do your kids come into that classroom feeling safe? Because that's number one. We have so many kids with trauma and they're coming from homes that we can't even imagine what they're going through. And they walk into a classroom already completely feeling dysregulated. So something as simple as greeting each student at the door, smiling, using their name, that helps calm and regulate kids. We know there's a lot more kids with challenging behaviors. So let's give them an appropriate way to regulate themselves. They know at any time they can go to the safe corner, sit in the beanbag, take deep breaths, and usually we can have visuals there to remind them.
So self-management, I think about, stop, think, act. With elementary children, it's very easy because they're often engaged in that play, whether it's at recess or through games. It's easy to have those conversations because of, conflicts that they have that we think are very minute, but for them are really great. With middle schoolers, I think through scenarios, going through skits and going through scenarios and really giving them real life examples versus having a fight or argument. What's the best way to address your conflict? What's the best way to communicate how you feel? That's an adult skill that you'll need for life. And I think we have to stop and really point out to kids, hey, this is not okay. There's a better way. Or really allow them to manage the problem for themselves and just be there as a facilitator to guide that process.
I'm feeling really frustrated at Johnny again because he took my truck. Well, I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm not going to grab him back or I'm not going to punch him because that's the wrong thing to do. So for little ones, it's teaching them that they have the control to take a breath, to take a moment and think about what they're going to do.
When we're talking about teaching self-management and how kids can practice that, we're really helping kids think through ways to stay focused and to stay engaged and persevere. So maybe during a math lesson, we're providing opportunities for them to work through multi-step problems and think through multiple solutions to those problems. We also may be asking students to think about how to control their impulses to shout out answers, really by giving them some norms and routines for how they can get their voice heard. We also want to encourage students to have their voice heard in positive ways. Having them at the table and having them feel heard gives them a better sense of who they are and how they can use their voice in positive ways. So we really believe elevating youth voice is an important part of helping students develop positive self-management and contributing to the greater good of the school.
Okay. Were there any reactions to that video? Anything that you all felt was, I don't know, resonated with you? I think one of the things that resonated with me the most was that when we make decisions that we really want to bring kids to the table, we want to get their voice, we want to hear what they have to say. Sometimes we just make decisions for kids, but I love that idea. But we'd love to hear from you. Anything that you took away from that video that you'd like to share, and maybe your ideas will inspire others' ideas. And if not, that's okay. We'll just hang on tight for about a minute.
While we're waiting for some responses, Erica, one thing that I found really interesting, because I have a story that relates, is when the teacher, I think, was sharing how, everyone's coming in with something different. Like, where our understanding is that when students are at school, they're ready to learn, but that's not always the case. So she said, when you walk in, do you feel calm? When you walk into a space, do you feel calm and do you feel safe? And that really does set the tone immediately as to like how your day is going to go. And I think about when I was first teaching, one of the best tips that I got was to make sure that like when I left my classroom for the day, that I reset it for the next morning. So that way when I came in the morning, right, my mental to-do list would already be busy, but I would be walking into a calm and centered place. And so I find that to be so important because we can say the same thing about our homes as well, right? Coming in after school and the hurriedness of unpacking and doing homework. If we have a space that allows that to happen right away, or we have a snack laid out, we have just a defined space, it automatically just checks one mental thing off of our to-do list to say, okay, like now I can really focus in on what's important.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love how you use the video or had the video share that with you. And you're going to get into that in a moment,
I
Danielle.
am.
So thank you so much for sharing that.
We
And
do have teacher
Maria,
comments in the chat. Yeah. Go
oh,
ahead.
yeah. Sorry. Yes, I saw as you were talking that we as adults have all the control to show children to think through things. Yes. So, Maria, thank you so much for sharing that. And we're going to really talk about that next, just all the things that we can do as adults to support children to think through their actions, think through their responsibilities. So just hang tight. But one of the things that I also really loved about the video is this idea of creating a regulating environment. So everything we're going to talk about today, Danielle and I, is all about how we can create these external structures, right, around children so they can develop their internal coping skills. And so I'm going to hand the baton over to Danielle again. She's going to talk about what this looks like in schools. And Danielle, whenever you're ready, go on ahead
Thank
and
you.
mute myself.
So I feel like the video provided a lot of excellent examples. So you will see a lot of similar things in the next few slides. I do want to share that what I'll talk about are ways that schools can help support the work that we continue to do at home. School and home communities are a partnership. And so I'm hoping that whether you're currently in the classroom working with students or you're a parent, you'll be able to kind of take note of some of the strategies that I share that I personally have used in my own classroom, as well as strategies that I've seen other teachers in various school settings adopt as well. But I'm hoping that you'll notice that these are not just teacher or school specific. These are just kind of schools of thought that help us to think about ways that we can support students and children in regulating their emotions, defining spaces, and giving them a place to do that work, as well as thinking about how we can transfer behavior into action. I'm a big believer that behavior is communication, right? At the very earliest stages, we have a newborn baby that's crying, and our job is to figure out what they need. And in schools, that's no different. The challenge that we have as educators is that we are in a classroom with a large number of students with various needs. But one thing that I'd like us to consider, not just in a school community, but also at home, is being proactive and thinking about what works best for us, what we may need in our own spaces, and thinking about ways that we can kind of build in those supports so we can anticipate barriers either to learning or to what we're looking at home. And so, one thing that I've done kind of proactively in my own classroom, and they mentioned it in the video as well, is I created a calm corner. So you'll notice two things on your screen. You'll see a picture of a calm corner, but you'll also see a picture of a classroom. That was one of my classrooms in a district that I worked in. And so you'll see in the top left hand of your screen, there's a doorway. And so when I was creating a calm corner, I taught second grade, and our initial thought was that it would be kind of just tucked back in that corner away from the board in a private space. And for some students, that's really helpful, right? Just being in a separate area of the classroom, but still being in the classroom so they can hear and see what's going on. For some students that just needed a minute, they would just like to sit in that space and listen to what I was doing from there. Other students prefer to face towards the wall, so they had a private space to think. But I recognize that that doesn't always work for every student. And so I had another student where they needed extra physical space in order to regulate themselves. And so just outside of that classroom door, we had a floor to ceiling glass window. And so I was able to kind of carve out a space for them so they could move their body in a way that made them feel calm. While also being able to be in proximity of the teacher. And so it is important to remember that different children require different things in order to meet their needs. But besides just having that space, I also provided different tools to help them regulate. And so you can see some on your screen. Having a feelings chart, even for our youngest learners, just having something as simple as pictures of different faces and different emotions, and giving them a Velcro arrow just to kind of point to where they're feeling. It just helps them to be able to express out what they're feeling. And so it's our job as educators and as parents to help figure out what comes next. What can we do to support them where they are? In addition to naming their feeling and emotion, I also provided some strategies for ways that we could calm down. That could be things like taking a deep breath, counting down. Erica will share some strategies, I'm sure, in a little while to help support that. Other students needed to fidget and have things in their hands, maybe some Play-Doh or some other tools just to kind of put some deep pressure in to get that feeling out of their body and transfer it into something else. And other students needed movement. I had students that needed to do jumping jacks in order to regulate themselves or needed to give themselves a really big hug. And so just by kind of anticipating that students and children will feel frustrated, will feel overwhelmed, and having predetermined spaces and strategies to give them helps them to be reflective and think, okay, when I need this, or if I'm feeling this, I can go here. And we'll talk in a moment about how important it is to model behavior and actions and words. And everything that you'll see and hear me talk about, I've rolled out with intention. These are all of the core things that we talk about at the beginning of the school year. So students are very supported and know what the expectations are for when we're using things. And so that kind of brings me to where we're moving next. So besides having one individual space, thanks, Erica. Yeah, this will be quick. You'll see in the picture, you'll notice that not every table looks the same. We also adopted flexible seating in my classroom, and that's because I recognize that some students, in order for them to do their best, they needed to move. When I moved into my classroom, eliminated a lot of unnecessary furniture so there would be as much floor space as possible. So in going back to what that teacher mentioned, when you walk in, do you feel calm? When I moved into my classroom, there was tons of furniture and I felt very overwhelmed because I didn't know where I could set up spaces to meet with students in small groups and to meet on a carpet. And so I made it my mission to really make my students feel supported by creating an environment that encourages movement and encourages them to feel that they have choices. And so flexible seating is something that I adopted. We sat as a class, every day students would come in and unpack in one specific place. So that was expected. They knew exactly where to go and put their things away. And then when it was time for us to go off and learn independently, they were provided options for where they would work. In some younger classrooms, like kindergarten through second grade, we chose spots once a week. So every Monday morning, we would have a morning meeting and they would decide where they would like to work to do their best learning. At the beginning of the year, we spent some time trying out all different places so they could determine what worked best, what maybe didn't work as well. And then I found that when I turned those choices over to students, they felt that they could then focus in on the task at hand when they were comfortable. And we talked about ways to troubleshoot. If we're sitting by a friend and we're talking, that might not be the best pace for us. Um, but this was done with students. This was done in the conversation as part of our classroom community. And so, as you'll see as we'll go on, having student participation and choice and buy-in is extremely important. Students want to do their best when they feel like they are a member of a community and it's their own shared space. So you can go to the next slide. So when thinking about building a classroom community, there is an education and parent author named Alfie Kohn, and he describes two schools of thought when we're thinking about sharing information with students. And those are the doing to and working with schools of thoughts. Yeah, thank you, Erica. So doing to means that the teacher is the sole recipient, the sole provider of knowledge, and it's just their job to just deposit information to their students, kind of like a bank, right? You go to the bank, you deposit information. Um, versus working with students, understanding that it's a shared space. Everyone is a teacher, everyone is a learner, and we can create and set rules and procedures that benefit everyone. And I found that as I shifted towards the working with structure of education, it impacted my classroom tremendously. Students felt much more comfortable in sharing information. They felt ownership over the work that they were doing. Everyone was an equal participant in helping out when we needed to clean things up, we needed to organize because we truly felt like this was our own shared space. And so you can see that there's a list of classroom rules, and it doesn't say in my classroom as the teacher, it says in our classroom because our understanding and expectation was everyone that entered into our classroom would abide by those core tenets of things that we determined were important to us. Right? We show respect to ourselves, teachers, friends, community. We make mistakes and learn a lot from them. Um, a few years ago for teacher appreciation, my students created a book and it was your favorite memory with Mrs. Scarpa. And for some of them, their favorite memory was when we were doing something on the board. I think it was in math, and I made a mistake. And they caught it before I did. And they were like, oh my goodness. And it became this giggle fest of, wait, you made a mistake, but mistakes are part of growth and part of learning, and mistakes prove that we're human. And so I think it's important for students to know that, there's things that everyone can work on. When we're talking about naming and regulating our emotions, there's days when, we would come into school and I would feel really stressed, or we would be talking in morning meeting and we'd say, how do you feel today? And I'd say, today I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. And the room would stop and they would go, you are? Yes, of course. Like as people, right, we all have those emotions. And so, I think that it's really important for students to recognize that, and even for our own children to recognize that we are people. To little ones, we wear very defined hats. Like, I'm mom, I can't have a bad day. You're mom. But if mom is sick, I wasn't feeling well last week. My two children needed to make sure that they had what they needed for school. And so it's important for us to recognize that by modeling and by having these conversations all together as part of a shared learning community, that students see the value in doing all of these things, not just to their own benefit, but to the benefit of everyone else. And so, in thinking about routines and procedures, students and children thrive from routine. They like to know what's coming. They like to see it done consistently. And so at the beginning of the school year, we would spend a lot of time going over exactly what to do, where to do it, where to place our belongings. And I've adopted that same strategy at home. I have a kindergartner and a preschooler this year. So we're in two different schools, two completely different routines. But every day when we're getting ready to go to school, our backpack is in the same place. Our coat is in the same place. When we come home, we have a determined space for where we do our homework, where we put our things away. And by taking the time together to roll out these routines, um, over time, I've then had to scale back and say, okay, now you're able to do this on your own. And so I noticed that at home, it's allowed me to spend more quality time with my children instead of answering all of the very simple questions that we can answer ourselves. I mentioned that I was sick last week. And so it was a really big test to our routine, right? Could my children know what to do and know where to find things without me being readily available to them? And it's no different in a classroom, right? As teachers, we have our own professional responsibilities, or we're working with a small group and we don't have time or the availability to then meet everyone else's needs. But if we know where our work goes when it's time to turn it in, if we know where our jacket goes, those are just things that students can do independently. And they take a lot of pride in doing that. They take a lot of pride in knowing, oh, I can do this. We've got this. We can all do this. And so I'm a big believer in taking the time and rolling things out with intention and doing it really well once, because if not, you're troubleshooting and doing it over and over again. And so thinking about times when teachers are not available in the classroom, if there's a substitute, your day can continue on. Things can still run smoothly because your students know exactly what to expect. And the same goes for at home as well. And then quickly, the last two things that we'll talk about are setting goals and self-reflection. And we'll look in a few minutes about what some of this looks like, and also reframing language. One of the things that we want students to think about in terms of achievement, and I think Erica shined a light on this, that they noticed that students were successful based on their own effort, less than IQ. Like obviously IQ is very important, but effort is what really takes a really savvy student and really like bumps them up. And so in thinking about that, growth mindset and a fixed mindset are two things that we don't just hear in education, but also in life as well. And so having a growth mindset means that you recognize that learning is limitless. You're reflective. You think about ways that you can set goals for yourself. And I've had some very high achieving students, children that were in gifted and talented, that had a really tough time doing that because in their mind, they had met the goal, they had completed the task, they had checked all of the things off of their to-do list. But that higher level thinking really stems from, okay, we've achieved this, let's push ourselves further. And so, in thinking about ways that we can do that, things like setting goals individually as well as a group, thinking about what to do when we encounter adversity, right? We don't get the answer right the first time. What do we do? Do we shut down or do we keep moving forward? It allows students to be reflective and allows children to be reflective and dig deep and think about ways that they can persevere. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was thinking about the language that we use when we're thinking about student achievement. Children by nature want to please others and they want to please themselves. And so when we're sharing compliments, it's very easy to say, oh my gosh, look at, all of these questions are right. You're so smart. And while that's certainly true, we want students to think about smartness as something that's intrinsic, something that's within them based on their own effort and less about the achievement to please other people. So thinking about things like, oh my gosh, you worked so hard on that, or I can see the effort. You must feel so proud. Getting them to think about smartness to themselves and think about ways that they can empower themselves. So when they're having those moments of, I can't do this, I feel stuck, they can give themselves that self-talk because we're teaching them to be reflective using, thinking about the language that they're using. And so lastly, so thinking about routines in school as well as at home that we can use to reinforce self-management. Having a schedule posted, whether it's in our classrooms or at home, whether it's digital or on paper, just really helps us know exactly what to anticipate for the day. And so if there are interruptions to that or if there's something different, we know that ahead of time. Sitting down and having a problem-solving meeting or a meeting every day sets the intention moving forward. It gives everybody the opportunity to participate and think about things that they want to share. At home, we do this at dinner. If we're having a tough time or I'm noticing that, we're not cleaning up after ourselves or we're not putting toys away, we'll sit down at dinner and we'll kind of talk with our children and say, what are some things that we could do to make this easier? Do we need new bins to put things in? Or, what do you think? Kind of having that space that's comfortable allows students the opportunity to feel more comfortable in sharing. using scaffolding and different tools to stay organized or modeling behaviors and expectations. My daughter's in kindergarten and her teachers use a hand signal method when they need something. If they need a pencil, if they need to go to the bathroom. So if the teacher is teaching to 25 children, every hand that goes up isn't automatically that they need to use the restroom. They can kind of eliminate some of those distractions by having built-in procedures. And it's been really, really beneficial because learning can continue. And lastly, modeling. I can't stress enough how important this is, even if it's something that's very similar. Children like to be told explicitly what to do. They thrive on routine and predictability. And so if you're showing them exactly where to put things, exactly how you want things done, they will be more than happy to comply. But we want to make sure that whatever we're doing, if especially if it's something new, we're holding their hand and taking them through those steps. So then we can eventually gradually release that responsibility to them, and then they can feel successful in doing that.
Thank you so much,
I
Danielle.
know that's a lot to
No, that was a
unpack.
lot of information. So I
Yeah.
actually wanted to pause for a moment, and ask, well, you can share if you'd like to, if any of these strategies resonated for you, but also, is there anybody who has any questions about anything that Danielle presented? We'd be very happy to just pause for a moment before I go into the next part of our presentation. Um, so we'll just pause for a minute. Anybody have any questions? And what we can do is, if you do have questions or you do have thoughts, you can enter them into the chat box, and then Danielle can monitor the chat while I move along here. I'll wait for just like another 30 seconds. Okay. So I'm going to keep moving along because despite all of the wonderful things that we can put into place for our children, there's going to be some common challenges that come up. So right now we're going to talk about some of the common challenges and troubleshooting that can happen when we're dealing with kids and their self-management. But first, the most important thing I think I just wanted to start with is just making sure that, like, in any of these moments, that the most important thing is the adult well-being and how well the adult is doing. So we can't do any of these things if our tank is empty. So making sure that you're in a good spot is paramount to anything we can do for our kids. So I just want to make sure that I say that that all of these things are great, but your well-being is the most important. So taking that into consideration. So despite all these wonderful things that Danielle had just mentioned that we could do for kids, sometimes we come up with these challenges that are just, with one child, with many children. Um, but what are some things we can do about it? So we have a child here, he just can't calm down after recess. He just doesn't have that impulse control. He's really like he can't regulate. He's very dysregulated. This could also happen at home if a child is like out on a play date and gets very, very riled up and then comes home and can't calm down, right? So, what are some things we can do if our child is in a state of dysregulation? How can we get them regulated back? So, just like Danielle had mentioned, we can have a lot of predictable routines, right? So, if you know that a child is coming in every day from recess and they're very, very wound up, maybe making sure that they know exactly what's going to happen after recess, right? We hang our coats up, we come and we have some quiet time. It's then going to be time for reading. Here's your checklist. So everything is predictable. So they know, okay, uh, if they're coming in from recess and they're like, I don't know what's next, and there's a little bit of anxiety there, we can make sure that they know exactly what's coming up. We could also have a calm entry cue. So this could happen at home, right? Like we can play music. We can have a little chime, right? That signals that like it's time to come into the room. It's time for like a different state of being. And so, however you want to foster that, music is a wonderful tool that could really help uh, move a child from a state of dysregulation to a state of regulation. Student roles. So really like having a child be responsible for something can really take them out of a place of, chaos. So if you have, let's say you're going to be the note taker when I'm going to do my lesson, or even at home, you're going to be setting the table like as soon as you come home because I really, really need your help. So having that agency and helping support student agency can really help to regulate them. And then, of course, there's body-based strategies. So any kind of deep breathing, any kind of stretching, any kind of way to calm, anything that you use that you find to be really helpful, I imagine could also be really helpful for children. We've done this thing where every night, 2 minutes a night, we have our kids. I have a middle schooler and an elementary school student, and we have them close their eyes and they have to just sit still for 2 minutes. And so when they're in a place of chaos, or they're coming in and they're, wound up, or they're feeling frustrated or angry, we just say, like, remember those 2 minutes that you practice every night, like try to do that right now so you can calm yourself down. So doing all these things in places of calm is a very, very helpful strategy. So you don't want to do it necessarily always when a child is riled up, but doing it in advance. Okay, then we have another common challenge. She just shuts down when she gets frustrated. So this could be with schoolwork, it could be, anything like with play, it could be any kind of situation, either at home or in school. But what could we do to help a child who shuts down when they get frustrated? So we can normalize mistakes. We can use our language to help show that every mistake teaches us, right? So if you're getting very, very stuck with some kind of problem, or you're, really working through something tough, normalizing that mistakes happen. And that's kind of what Danielle had said earlier that she encourages in her classroom, right? Like, mistakes are the things that really help us to move forward. So normalizing that and not making mistakes, punitive or a big deal can really help a child feel more frustration tolerance. Creating safe check-ins. So sometimes, especially when you're in a classroom, children don't necessarily feel comfortable expressing themselves out loud. So they could be frustrated and then they just shut down. So if there's a way to create a safe check-in with a child where maybe they have, something on their desk where they have a frown face, sort of like this medium face or a smiley face, and they could show you where they are right now. So if I'm, let's say, feeling I'm really in a state of frustration. I notice I'm spiraling. I can maybe give you like a check-in or a signal that's really private and maintains my anonymity, but also lets you know that I'm having a hard time. Reinforcing effort. So that's exactly what Danielle has said earlier. So we're going to make sure that children know that they're not necessarily smart or not smart, but we're going to reinforce the effort they put into whatever they worked on. And that really helps with frustration tolerance, because it's not like I'm just really bad at math, I'm really bad at reading. It's the effort that we're putting into it, and anyone can put in effort. You don't have to be good at math, you don't have to be good at reading. So um, really encouraging that effort can really help. And then modeling self-talk. So kind of like Danielle was saying earlier, right? Like, oh my gosh, like I made a mistake. Like I'm gonna go back and fix it, or I'm gonna take these steps to sort of help myself. So really anything that we can do to really narrate anything that we're going through that helps us deal with any kind of frustration really shows children that they're not the only ones that have to deal with these kinds of situations. Adults have to deal with them too. And normalizing that and modeling that is a really wonderful strategy. The next challenge that we can come up with, oh, he blurts out answers and interrupts. And so I have a child who makes lots of noises all day, every day, and does not have any sense of self-control. So this doesn't just happen in the classroom, this happens in our homes too. So what do you do with a child who's impulsive, who cannot control their need to, orate all of their ideas and thoughts? Here are some ideas, and here's some troubleshooting. So we could have visual reminders. So this I use this in one of my classrooms where I had a traffic light, and then I had a clothespin. And if the clothespin was on red, it means there was no talking. If the clothespin was on yellow, it means there was quiet conversation voices. And if the clothespin was on green, it meant my students were free to just chat and have lively conversations. So instead of using our voices or instead of getting into a power struggle, a child can just look up and see, oh, the clothespin is on red, that means it's silent, or the clothespin is on yellow, that means it's quiet conversation. Visual reminders can be super helpful. I love this pause power, right? So we can teach a child to notice when they're starting to get a little bit impulsive, right? So, like, what do you feel like in your body? What does it feel like to feel that need to constantly shout out? And then teaching them some kind of strategy to pause. So, it could be like taking a deep breath, counting to three. But the idea would be like, we're not just going to follow through with whatever we want to follow through with. We're going to pause. We're going to take a deep breath. We're going to count. And then we're going to make a choice about what we want to do. So this is called pause power. Sometimes you could have like a stop sign, and there could be like a stop method where it's like notice what's happening inside you and make a good choice for yourself. So any strategy that you could use to get them to pause is really helpful. Cue privately. So this is something similar to what I had mentioned on the previous screen, the idea of keeping anonymity. So sometimes I would actually notice when my students were, or if there was one particular child who, had trouble with self-control, I would actually notice the sort of trajectory where they would start to like get a little squiggly in their seat, or I would just notice like the very slight behavioral changes that would happen before there was sort of an outburst. And so in those moments when I caught them right away, I would cue them privately. So I would give like some sort of private cue, and I would like put my finger on my nose, or I would pull my ear, or I would give a wink. And this was something I had talked about with students prior. So I had said, whenever I notice that you're about to have an outburst, I'm going to put my finger on my nose. And that means I notice that something's happening, and you're going to notice it too. And we're going to, help you to calm down. So again, this really protects a child's self-esteem and helps them to know that they're not doing or they're about to maybe make a not great choice. And we're going to help them get to a better spot. And then give roles. So this is the same kind of thing that I had said earlier. If you notice a child is always calling out on the rug, or for example, at dinner time, like when my son really like just can't control himself and he's having like tons of outbursts, I'll give him a role like, okay, it's time to take your dishes to the sink. It's time to, like give the dog food, or just giving some kind of role that gets him out of that space. Maybe you have, if you're a classroom teacher, you have a paper passer outer, or maybe you have a note taker. So really like focusing that energy in a more positive way could be very, very helpful. Okay, then we have a child who gives up too easily. So they don't have the tolerance to withstand any kind of challenge. And so we see this, of course, in the home, and we see this, of course, in an education setting. So something becomes challenging, and this child just gives up very easily. So what can we do? So this is something that I love. I love to think about both in the education setting and at home, is goal setting. And so what we want to think about with children who give up pretty easily is that we want to think about that this big overwhelming task they have could actually be broken up into small parts. So if you have a child that needs to finish an essay, but is totally overwhelmed by the fact that they have to write an essay, you can break it up into like small parts for them. So I will just finish two sentences. I will add punctuation. I will add supporting details. So, and then as they go along, they can check off when they accomplish those things. And then maybe there's even a reward at the end, like, okay, you finished your whole essay. Now you can get some extra computer time, or you can, whatever the reward might be. I also like to think about this in the home. Let's say your child is supposed to clean their room, but their room is completely crazy messy. You can break that up into tasks. So I will make my bed. I will clean up my clothes off the floor. I will, sweep. And they can check it off after they've done it. And maybe they get some kind of like extra TV time, or maybe they earn an allowance, but really helping them to break up the large task into small parts. And then peer modeling. So, what can we do to show children um, what it looks like to have positive work skills? So, in a classroom, you might want to partner this child up with, maybe a student who really knows how to, complete an assignment without a meltdown, or knows how to break things up, or maybe at home, you have invite a friend over, or an older cousin, or anybody who can really show a child like this is the way it's done, not just because an adult is telling you, but because you're seeing it through another child. Okay, and then finally, my favorite one, because this would happen all the time, is that either my class feels very chaotic and everyone's energy is off, or maybe you're like, my family is super off, everything is feeling crazy, you feel it in your body, it's very stressful. And so what are some things we could do to help everybody to regulate? So the first thing we could do is, and again, this really, really, really the most important thing here is that you are in a good spot, right? Because if you're also sort of feeling that chaos and feeling that stress, it's going to be very, very hard to help students to calm down or your children to calm down. So the first step is regulating ourselves. And then we can think about using co-regulation. So co-regulation is really just being present for somebody who's dysregulated, or a group of children or a group of students, and being present and showing that you are in a regulated spot. And that can really like make a big impression on people who are around you. So showing like, I'm calm, I'm sitting still, I'm not getting like, crazed by the things that you're doing. And so that helps, just that one action can really help a child or a group of children to regulate themselves. This is something Danielle said earlier, but having a group reflection. So something I also do with my family is when I notice that something is off, we'll sit down and we'll have a family meeting. And the family meeting is, I'm noticing every day after school, we're not doing our homework. We're, going right to our screens. We're yelling, we're fighting. This needs to stop. What can we do? And that can, same thing can happen in the classroom. Like, I'm noticing there's some bullying going on. I'm noticing that we're not getting our assignments done the way that we need to. Like, what are some things that we can do to get back on track? So, at any time, pulling those group reflections is so, so powerful. Um, and then just two other last quick tips, a reset ritual. So that could be anything from just like, okay, I'm noticing we're getting a little crazy here. Let's just do a 5 minute, meditation, or we're going to reset. We're going to stretch. We're going to breathe. Again, I do this 2 minute meditation every night with my children, so that when I notice that they're in a chaotic spot or stressed out, that I could say, like, we're going to do our 2 minute meditation right now, so that you can calm down. And they're already super used to that. And then finally, and I think one of the most important things is empowering students. So not necessarily sharing like what we think that they should do, but asking, what do you think we should do? Um, can really, really be helpful to bring them into the conversation. So those are some of the common challenges that we see coming up. I'm sure you see that as well with the children that you work with. Um, so we're just at the end of our webinar here. It's 6:57, and we'd love to hear from you. Any questions you have or any takeaways that you have, please enter those into the chat box. While you're doing that, I'm just going to share with you. You will get a copy of this presentation, And the presentation will have 2 QR codes that will allow you to access the presentation, and also a bunch of resources that we pulled together. So you can either click on this folder here or you can scan the QR code. But you will get the entire presentation and access to all the things that were in here because you signed up through your email. So you'll get that pretty soon. But we wanted to say thank you so much for coming tonight to our webinar. Any questions that you have, any things that you're like hoping to take away or that you are going to be taking away, we'd love to hear. And we thank you so much for coming and hope you have a wonderful evening.